Good evening. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Thank you for coming and joining us this evening on Libya. Hello. We also understand that Libya, although such an important country, a country in turmoil, but also, in seeing so many challenges, we just mentioned it's mainly in our news with regards to migration. However, of course, it's a country that very rich in great oil wealth, at the same time basically cursed, so to speak, by and also challenged by probably not only but also climate-related floods and other catastrophes, and importing migrants from its neighboring countries like Egypt, but also, of course, as I just mentioned, exporting those to migrants to Europe to make this complex situation very short, and also. I believe important for us to become aware of this of its geopolitical situation. So this is the reason why we have it on our agenda here, and I'm welcoming Michel Cousins. Thank you very much for joining us. Gudrun Harrer, our expert and curator on the Middle East, will lead the discussion, will moderate the discussion. Also, Excellencies, welcome, former Austrian ambassador to Libya, also ambassador. Thank you for and colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you also for joining us here. I wish you an interesting evening and interesting discussion afterwards. Again. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine. Well, thank you for joining us at this evening dedicated to Libya. I mean, even more so in a time when it's really difficult to focus on a Middle East, North Africa topic other than Gaza, other than this conflict. And I welcome our distinguished guest of today, Michel Cousins, or not? Cousins, Cousins, we say Cousins. If I remember correctly, the Bruno Kreisky Forum series, Arab Middle East Changes, perhaps you don't even know, Sabine, even started with a discussion on Libya. In the distant year 2011, in March, when UN Security Council Resolution 1973 was adopted. As many of you know, of course, it was a legal basis for the NATO intervention, which allowed the revolution to topple Gaddafi. And this resolution authorized the international community to use all means necessary, short of occupation, to protect civilians. I mean, a long, long time ago. Many of us thought at that time that Libya could become a success story. A relatively small population as Sabine pointed out, in a very rich country, oil-rich country. And you know what happened in the years since. We have a war-torn, deeply divided country with even double institutions, if we can call them like that. However, we have the best possible guest to explain to us what went wrong and why, and of course also what could the prospects for the future be. Michel Cousins is a British journalist who was brought up in Libya, and he went also to school there until 1982, and it was a time of really turmoil. I mean, also at that time, or many changes Gaddafi made at that time, when his parents left the country. Michel went back to Libya in 2011 with the revolution and started a newspaper, Libya Herald, which I have to say was a main source for many of us until it became too costly. He's a consultant on Libya and writes in many publications. For example, here we have Libya Energy Magazine and others. Libya Herald Business Eye is a special publication of Libya Herald and many other magazines and newspapers. Also, Sabine mentioned it, it is quite frustrating that Libya comes up mainly when we discuss migration problems in the Mediterranean. In a recent paper for the Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, Wolfram Lacher explains that European migration policy not only does not help Libya, but instead causes a negative fallout by consolidating the detention system instead of helping to reform it and to improve the situation, the human rights situation, and empowering warlords and provoking a backlash from the Libyan public. However, we want to draw your attention also to different developments. Some of you might not even have heard the name of the relatively new, I mean, since January, I think, no? UN Special Representative of the UN Secretary General in Libya and head of the UN Support Mission in Libya, UNSMIL. Her name is Hannah Tete. Teta, you say? Teta? Teta. Yeah. She's, I mean, I think born in Hungary, and but nationality of Ghana, as far as I know. And in August, she presented a new political roadmap for Libya with the aim of finally creating a unified government and reforming the election commission and having election legislation and finally hold the first elections. Since 2014, as you know, of 2014, the results were contested. And of course, we will talk about what these elections mean and or don't mean. By the way, local elections have just taken place, the second phase of three-phase local elections. And Mrs. Teta has to report back to the UN Security Council in October, and there doesn't seem much development. But we will hear what Michel thinks of it, among other things, and I give the floor to you, and we'll listen to you.
Right. I prefer to stand rather than
Please.
Sit. I will not inflict my appalling German on you, so it's going to be in English. I did learn German a long time ago. My father, who was Polish Silesian, he actually spoke German, but until he died, it's now 15 years ago, he still wrote German in Gothic script. He was very old-fashioned, but that's another story. Anyway, I was brought up in Libya. My parents went to Libya back in the early 50s. And in a way, they went in a way for the same reasons we're seeing migrants crossing the Mediterranean going from south to north. In those days and earlier, the migrants went from north to south looking for a better life. My father went to Libya in the early 50s because he was offered a job that was 10 times the salary what he was getting in Britain. He went for economic reasons. All those Italian colonists who were very poor, who went to Libya in the 20s and 30s, or even, they went for economic reasons. The same with French migrants to Algeria, and a lot of Spanish migrants to Algeria too, and the Italians who went to Tunisia, or the French. People used to cross the Mediterranean the other way. And so what we're seeing is just a reversal of the same trend. And I'll just bring that up now, the migration issue, because it's something I'm sure people are going to ask questions about before I get into the story of Libya. Libya seeps migrants into Europe. Why? It's very simple. It's because they can cross over the Mediterranean from Libya. They can't do it through Algeria. Some do from Tunisia, but not a lot, because the borders, the sea borders, are controlled. It's the same in Egypt. They are controlled. The land borders in the desert, none of them are controlled. People are moving from Mali to Libya through Algeria, and it's totally uncontrolled. The land borders you cannot control. But you can, if you had a single government a united government, you can control the Libyan sea border, but it's not being. And it's as simple as that. And until starts to be controlled, this will continue. There are lots of other things that need to be done, of course. On the whole, people don't like leaving home. They're leaving places where the economy or the situation is dire. There is one other thing. Lots of these young men, they're mostly young men, I talk to them. They also have a dream. And they want an adventure as well. They're 18, 19, 20. And young men, when they're 18, 19, 20, are very romantic. They have dream of adventures and dream of things. Younger women at that age are far more sensible and got their feet on the ground. Young men don't. And you're seeing, I speak to some of these people who've come from Niger or Nigeria or wherever, in Tripoli and in Tunisia. And they see this as an adventure. And they're going to save their families because they're going to get money and they're going to send it home. And you're not going to change young men wanting adventures. But on the whole, lots of people don't want to leave home, they have to. So they're going for, on the whole, mainly economic reasons. In some cases, it's political. If you're from Sudan and there's a lot of Sudanese moving into Libya in the east because of the situation in Sudan. But what I'm saying, and I want to just start with this, while Libya's sea border remains uncontrolled, and then there are also people taking advantage of that, certain militias and others who are making a lot of money out of it, that will carry on. And until you have a united government that is in control of all security in Libya, that has a monopoly on the use of force, it's going to carry on. I'm not going to go further down that route. I want to come back and talk about the bigger picture of Libya. Now, Libya's a mess. In Arabic, the word is fawda. Fawda, remember that word, fawda kabira, a big mess. But Libya isn't a mess, it's a series of messes which overlap and intertwine. So we have the mess of the split between East and West. But we have a mess in the West with all these militias and that mess. There's the corruption, there's the economic mess. And Libya is in a severe economic mess. There are several, but they all, like a millefeuille cake, sort of work together. And you need to solve each of them. And it's an awful lot to solve because Libya, in a way, is transitioning. It was a one-man state. You all remember, up until 2011, if you said Libya, everyone said Gaddafi. That's all anyone said. And Libya was Gaddafi. He was a sort of modern-day vampire who sucked out the character of the Libyans. And I must say one thing now so that people understand, so we all understand this. We hear an awful lot now about, people are nostalgic for Gaddafi, or how wonderful Gaddafi was. Gaddafi was not wonderful. Tripoli is probably the least developed capital city in all Africa. I can take you to places in Tripoli, relatively central Tripoli, where the streets are sand tracks, they've never been paved. I mean, if here compared to the centre, this in Tripoli would be sand outside on the road, where there's no drains, there's no water. Gaddafi did very little for Libya. And I see on social media people writing how wonderful Libya was under Gaddafi. What's interesting is that none of them are Libyans. It's people from other places. And you're told, healthcare was free. Yes, healthcare was free, but it wasn't any healthcare there to use. It's like going to a supermarket and it says, all the goods here are free, but there are no goods there. And so that's what it was like. And in those days, people went to Tunisia or Egypt for their health, to get their health if they could afford it, for their medical needs. Gaddafi did absolutely nothing, as I said. There was the great man-made river, but that was his own glory. In a way, he didn't care about Libya. And today, you have plenty of people who are nostalgic for the stability and security of the Gaddafi era, but not for the Gaddafis. So they would like the stability and security of the Gaddafi era back, but not the Gaddafis. Now, that leads me on to one other thing before I get to the main piece. You are seeing, particularly in Tripoli at the moment, in the West, people are saying, we need a strong man to run the country, who will take no nonsense, who will crush the militias. I'm hearing more and more people saying this recently, in the last few weeks, because they're looking at the East, and the East has suddenly got lots of money. We're not going to go into where the money's come from, because it's not exactly legitimate, let's put it that way. But there is money, and it's being spent on development projects, building this, building that. And people in the West, I was talking in Tripoli saying, oh, I work for a Turkish company, it's closing down its operations in Tripoli, it's moving to Benghazi. Or I am going to go to Benghazi myself because I can get a decent job there. So this is creating a different view now to what existed maybe 6 months ago, that Haftar's not that bad, actually. Or someone like that. And when they talk about a strong military leader, there isn't anyone except the Haftar family on the horizon. So in that sense, things are changing. Whether that leads to anything in the sense of there being a united government in Libya, I'm not sure. I want to come back. In fact, when I was thinking about this, where do I start when I talk about Libya? And actually, the best place to start is usually at the beginning. And so I'm actually going back a long way into Libyan history. The point about Libya, as we know it today, the country as we know it today, is a relatively recent creation historically. Libya, as we know it, there was a period when the Ottomans, well, let me stop there. Libya has been colonized or controlled by outsiders for the past forever and ever and ever. I mean, whether it was the Phoenicians, whether it was the Romans, the Greeks, the Spanish came in, the Arabs, of course. The Arabs invaded and settled there, and the most recent in terms of in the last century and a half, the Italians and the British as well, and the French coming up to the south. It was only in 1951, at the end of 51, that for the first time this country became an independent country. But if you go back in history, Libya didn't really exist as an entity. There is, within Libya, present-day Libya, there's a place, the east is called Cyrenaica, the west is called Tripolitania. The dividing line between them is the dividing line between East Mediterranean and West Mediterranean. The East has a different culture to the West. In the East, they eat rice. In the West, they eat couscous. In the East, they use Egyptian words, and they talk about tomorrow being bukra, is the word, the Arabic word, regional Arabic word for tomorrow. In the West, they say gudwa, which is the same as in Tunisia. There's lots and lots of differences, but historically the East veered towards Egypt, and the West is Maghreb. The East is not part of the Maghreb. And this is historic. And I said start at the beginning. The reality, part of the history of Libya, and Libya's got a very rich history. By the way, you've all heard of one Libyan, apart from Gaddafi, but way back, and that's St. Mark. St. Mark was from Cyrene. He would have said, in that part of the world in those days was Greek-speaking. Cyrene was a major Jewish city, a large Jewish population, should I say. But Mark, certainly in the tradition of the Coptic Church, which was founded by St. Mark, is Mark comes from Cyrene. And there are others that say the same. And the people from Cyrene did say, I'm Libyan. And Mark, had he probably been asked where you're from, he would have said, I'm Libyan. but that's a different Libya to today's Libya. That's important to remember. 2,500 years, no, 2,700 years ago, there were only two cities in the Mediterranean, on the south sides of the Mediterranean, of any importance. Carthage, looking at your point, Carthage, Cyrene. This is before Alexandria came on the scene, so to speak. And they were powerful city-states, powerful economies, and they wanted to not have a war between each other. And so they came up with an agreement that two runners would run off from each place on a certain day and run and run and run in the opposite direction to Carthage going to Cyrene, Cyrene going to Carthage. And where they met, that would be the dividing line, and that would be their zone of influence, the bit up until the dividing line. We know the names of the two people who ran from Carthage. They were brothers, and they were called Phileni. And they ran, and either they ran far, well, they run, it appears they ran a lot faster than the ones from Cyrene because they got a lot further east than they perhaps should have got. And they were accused by the people from Cyrene of cheating, either having taken a boat or horses or set off much earlier or whatever. But they swore blind that they had not cheated. And the Cyrenaican said, people from Cyrene said, if you're prepared to lay down your lives for your word, we will accept it. And they said, yes, they were. So they were executed and buried. And they were buried at a place which is Wadi Ahmar. And an arch was built then. It fell down over time. And an arch was, Mussolini later built another arch to commemorate the event. But the point is, that point became the division for present East Libya and West Libya, 2,700 years ago. But it was also the dividing point between East Mediterranean and West Mediterranean. And the East was Greek-speaking up until the arrival of the Arabs. The West was Carthage, Phoenician, Berber, Amazigh, but also Latin-speaking. And that division remained all the way through, well, till the latter part of the Ottoman period in the late 19th century, but it was the Italians who got rid of it, because the Italians captured, or took from the Ottomans, two areas, East Libya, Cyrenaica, West Libya, Tripolitania, and initially ran them as separate colonies. Then they put them together for pure administrative reasons, and the Italian all the Italians were interested was colonizing the area. And when I say colonizing, filling it with settlers, Italian settlers, poor Italians from Sicily and southern Italy. That was their interest. And they eventually put the two together by the end of the late 1920s, and rummaged around in the history books and came up with the word Libya, which no one had heard of for the past 1700 years. A bit like the British did in Iraq when they put three provinces at the end of the First World War together because they'd promised to give the Sheriff of Mecca a kingdom, and they put these three provinces together that really didn't fit together and rummaged in the history books and called it Iraq, and no one had heard the term Iraq for at least 2,500 years. And strangely enough, these two situations, Libya and Iraq, have paralleled each other. A foreign colonial power creates a state for their own political interests. Then that state gets independence. You have a monarchy in each of them, which maintains a degree of unity for a while. Then there's a revolution, and the monarchy is replaced by a leader, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Gaddafi in Libya, and power, it works in the sense that fear, terror, means the country it stays united. The minute that person is removed from the scene, one way or another, in both cases being killed, the whole thing collapses because they were not natural constructs. Now, states do become natural constructs, but it takes ages. And this is the thing about Libya that sort of gets on my nerves a bit. Various things about Libya get on my nerves a bit, but that's because I like Libya and I care about Libya. You don't get upset about places that you don't care about. You know, I don't know much about Vietnam, and it doesn't worry me. I care about Libya. But the thing is that when the revolution, the present, the one in 2011, happened, everybody outside thought that, yeah, it's going to work. Just have some elections and it's going to be a piece of cake. And it hasn't worked because expectations were ridiculous, particularly foreign expectations were ridiculous. The idea that you can suddenly go from a dictatorship, a total dictatorship, through to a nice Western-style democracy, representative democracy, in just a few weeks, really, or months or whatever, is nonsense, because how long did it take most European countries to get to that? They've had civil wars, they've cut off kings' heads, they've been many civil wars. It's been brutal, centuries of brutality, not just, you know, a few months or whatever, you know, an intermediary period. And the idea that Libya or any country that's been in that situation can change like that is fantasy. It's foolishness, and it can't. It's almost a generational thing that's needed. It takes time, and unfortunately, the United Nations and UNSMIL I see as the biggest problems in Libya. There are other problems in Libya, but Libya has got lots of problems of its own. But the revolution in Libya was not actually created by outsiders. It was Libyans who created the revolution. But the way the outside community has responded to Libya has made things 1,000 times worse. 1,000 times worse. And frankly, the one that's been the worst is the UN. For the best of reasons, though. There are good people working with the UN, UNSMIL, but they think that elections will solve the problem. And we keep hearing this. I mean, we've got to get elections. And this is what's talked about all the time. And what I find bizarre about this is that, in fact, Libya has had elections. It's had elected 2 parliaments, one in 2012 and one in 2014. So it's had elections. And in fact, Libya is in the situation because it's had elections when the system wasn't ready for it. And I'll come back to the concept of legitimacy in a minute. But I can't remember who it was, maybe someone knows here, who said the definition of insanity is trying to do something again and again and expecting a different result. And that's exactly what the UN is doing. It's saying we must have elections, as if elections are going to solve the problems in Libya. Libya is a very, it's not fractured society, it's a very split society. Partly for geographical reasons. It's a big country where there's not a lot of people, and so where people are is in different places. But Libya is a community of communities. You'll hear people saying Libya is tribal. It's not tribal. But you could say it's tribalistic in the sense that all these different communities, some of which are towns, some of which are tribes, some of which are ethnic groups like the Tebu and the Amazigh Berbers, or they're an area. People have loyalties to those particular, their local group, whatever that group is. It might be a town like, a city like Miserat or a town like Zintan. They have these, but legitimacy in Libya, for us, legitimacy comes from the ballot box. Legitimacy in Libya does not come from the ballot box. A parliament is not the supreme authority. There is much more to it than the supreme authority. There is what the will of the communities are together. And most people, when they go and vote for someone in Parliament. It's like voting for someone to become a member of the Académie Française. You know, it's an honor. And yes, you can sit and talk and chat, and occasionally you can appoint some people, but you're going to have a very nice life and you'll make a lot of money. And it's an honor. Parliament is not seen as having the legitimacy, this fundamental legitimacy that we see in the West for parliaments. Where legitimacy lies, and legitimacy, the Arabic word is shar'iyya, it's crucial to understanding where the problems in Libya are. Because people constantly say, that group's not legitimate, that person's not legitimate, that's not legitimate. They don't actually say what is legitimate, although there are people who are now saying, quite a lot, who are saying need to go back to a constitutional monarchy because that's the only legitimacy. More and more saying this. But the issue of legitimacy comes up all the time. And so it's trying to go down the route for elections is, well, it's not going to happen. Even if it were to happen, even if it should happen, it's not going to happen because the way the system is structured, or the agreement, was in 2015 at the end of it, there was something called the Libyan political agreement, drawing together two chambers. It was the old General National Congress, which was the old parliament, and then the new parliament, the House of Representatives, but unfortunately the old parliament refused to admit that the new one had been elected and so stayed on in Tripoli. And these two bodies had an agreement called the Libyan political agreement. Now, the Libyan political agreement is the spanner in the works for getting Libya fixed. Because in Article 15 of this agreement, one of the things they set up, in Article 15, they say that the House of Representatives, which is the, you can call it the lower chamber or the parliament, and this other group that was set up called the State Council, which is like a second chamber of a parliament, but it doesn't. That's technically not right, but in reality, it's as if it is. In Article 15, it says that there can be no appointments for a new government, no appointments to sovereign institutions such as the head of the central bank, the head of the election authority, the audit authority, there's an administration authority, and the head of the Supreme Court and the Attorney General. Those posts have, along with the government prime minister, position of prime minister and ministers, can only be made, the decision can only be made if there is agreement between these two houses. So, and there isn't. And there's no intention of agreeing, because if they do agree, then there's going to be elections and they'll be out. And they don't want to be out. And so the situation remains deadlocked, deliberately deadlocked. And the only way to get rid of this, get past this, is for the UN or UNSMIL. Doesn't need to be going back to the UN, but UNSMIL and certain influential foreign players in Libya, like the United States, like Italy, like Britain is an influential place there as far as the Libyans are concerned, but Britain isn't interested in Libya anymore. But Turkey as well, that's a very important player in Libya now. And Egypt, if they all said, the Libyan political agreement is dead, the House of Representatives as exists, and the State Council as exists are expired, they've passed their sell-by date. If that was said, Libya can move forward. And what is more, if that was said, Libyans would be jumping up for joy and they'd be celebrating that these two venal bodies who are self-serving were got rid of. But unfortunately, the international community, and not just the UN, takes this view, well, if they go, who do we talk to? But the reality is there's lots of people they can talk to. But these two bodies are stopping things happening because they do very nicely. We're important people. We get lots of money. One of the things that people may not know, I think it's $2,000 a day. Any Libyan official who goes on a foreign visit is allowed to get $2,000 a day, even if it's all covered. Everything he gets to, well, that's very nice, you know, having $2,000 a day in your pocket, especially with the rate of exchange with the Libyan dinar to the dollar. But That's another thing, by the way. Everything, you will hear this again and again in Libya, it's all about money. This is the expression, people. It's all about money. Because, and this is the awful thing. Libya has been cursed with money. King Idris once said, the former king, he wished that they'd never found oil in Libya. He wished they'd found water. Because he saw oil as corrupting, or the wealth, and it has corrupted. And there's an awful lot of corruption in Libya, an awful lot of theft. I'm not going to go into that, but it's part of this mess. With so much money to steal, lots of people have got a good reason to want to keep things as they are because they're milking the system, seriously milking, and some foreign countries are doing that as well. Doing quite well in Libya. So Libya is a series of messes. I want to just quickly talk about, I mean, I could go on for hours, but there's just so much to say about Libya, and I said I care about it a great deal. There are lots of odd things you might think about Libya. You know, we say it's a mess. Yet you go downtown in Tripoli, the shops are full. There seems to be more shops in Tripoli than there are here in Vienna. I mean, they're packed with goods, and you sometimes think, who's going to buy all these goods? I mean, there's a street, one of the main streets, called 24 December Street. It used to be called 1st of September Street, and before that it was called 24 December Street, and before that it was called Regina Margherita under the Italians, and I'm old enough to have remembered all of them. There's this street, and it is full of shops selling dinner jackets, you know, ones that you dress up. Now, the point is, who is buying these things? There are more shops selling dinner jackets in one street in Tripoli than there are probably in all of Britain or all of France or all of Germany put together. And you don't see anybody in the shops. There's another street appropriately called Shara Electronia, full of electronic goods. There's another street full of chandeliers, 1.5 kilometers of chandeliers, I would say, on both sides. And they're fantastic chandeliers. They really are very good. But you think, who's buying? Because there's nobody in them buying anything. Tripoli is full of goods. Shops are packed and packed. And that's, by the way, where some of the foreign exchange is going on the black market. It's been going through on the black market because the people aren't necessarily get it. I'll explain how the black market is fiddled in a minute, how the exchange, imports and exports are fiddled in a minute. But there's just so much stuff. And I was last week, went into a supermarket, and the amount of things there is phenomenal, things you can't get together anywhere else in the world almost. And in Libya, everything's imported. The amount of orange juice, for example. There's orange juice from the Philippines. There's orange juice from China. There's orange juice from Brazil. There's local orange juice from Italy, from Spain, blah, blah, blah. Tuna fish. There was a row from about there to about there of tins of tuna fish, of different brands. I'm not saying that it was all different types of tuna fish and vegetable or whatever, but different brands. Tuna fish from Thailand, tuna fish from Spain, tuna fish from vast amounts, all at much the same price. And you say, this is crazy. It is actually crazy. And unfortunately what happens is, having filled the shops with all this tuna fish, a lot of it just sits and has to be thrown away because it doesn't get sold. But Tripoli is boom town. And by the way, the biggest boom town in Libya at the moment is a place called Kufra in the southeast. It's making a lot of money on smuggling, but also the Sudanese migrants who are coming up. But it's boom town there, boom construction. I think one thing that's important to point out, Libyans are excellent business people. They see an opportunity and can grab an opportunity, and they will do fantastic things with it. Sometimes those opportunities are wrong and immoral, you know, like people smuggling, kidnapping. But let's be honest, they're a business opportunity for many people. I was talking to a Libyan businessman the other day, in fact two, and they said the same thing, which is, we don't like Israel, you know, we fully support the Palestinians, but if there's a deal to be done with an Israeli businessman, they'll do it. And you can say that's practical, but it's about money is important. And it comes back to this, everything is about money in Libya. And just one other thing about money, about the mess that's Libya in. Libya is earning less, Libya is spending more than it's earning at the moment because there is a vast state employment sector, too many people employed on the state payroll. I mean, in education, for example, I think there's something like 600,000 people employed by the Ministry of Education, but only 150,000 actually do anything, actually teach or whatever. The rest stay at home, or some have never been near a school in their lives, apart from when they went to school themselves. There's subsidies too, which is crazy. A litre of gasoline, petrol, costs 15 gersh, that's piastres. Gersh is the smaller amount. Officially it's called dirhams, and it's 150 dirhams, but everyone just says 15 gersh. And that is about 2 euro cents a litre. A litre of water costs over 10 times that, more than 10 times that amount. And everybody says, beginning to say, this is not right, that water should cost so much more than fuel, diesel fuel or petrol. And you see it on the streets in Tripoli. The amount of traffic is horrendous. A journey, I mean, coming from central Vienna to here, I thought was horrendous because it took longer than I expected. But in Tripoli, a journey that should take me maybe 15 minutes can take 2 hours, easy. And the streets are just full of traffic. Basically because, well, cars cost not a lot, there's no tax. And the fuel, well, it doesn't matter. So the subsidies on fuel, but on electricity and on other items, mean that Libya the authorities are spending a lot of money on that they shouldn't have to spend on that. And again, the salaries are, the state's budget for salaries is enormous. And the result of this is part of the economic mess. But the authorities don't want to, they all know that it should be dealt with, and they talk about it. We need to deal with this, but no one will take a decision because they are afraid, given the present circumstances, of social unrest, because all these young guys who drive around their cars, who are aged 18 or so, they are, you know, that's the only thing that's only fun to have. And if they're not money earners because they get the money from their father. If suddenly they've got to pay 10 times the price for fuel that they were paying a few days before, there's going to be a lot of discontent, and there'll be some demonstrations and possibly riots, which is why the government won't do anything about it. So the government is just carrying on allowing money to be spent on salaries and subsidies. Now, there's another issue, which is a serious one. If you wander down the streets in Tripoli and you see all these shops, there are several shops selling safes, and many shops selling safes. Probably, again, more shops selling safes in Tripoli than in, say, France or Britain or even the United States, I'd have thought. Why? Because people do not trust the banks. So they keep their money at home. And in fact, there is a story, and everyone tells me it's true, and it probably is true, that about one man in a place in West Tripoli who has built a walk-in safe that's about the size of this room. And everyone else is in people put their money there, and he charges them a certain amount of commission or whatever, and they're keeping their money. It's, you know, great business. As I said, Libyans are very good at seizing an opportunity and running with it. But the reality is that people... sorry. As I said, I could go on for hours. And you've got lots of questions for us. But the problem is, the reason this is a problem, people are not putting their money in the banks. At the end of the month, salaries get paid out. Where's the cash? So they have to print more cash to give the salaries out, which means that's inflation. And the cycle just carries on because people are not putting their money back in the bank. So what did the government do, the authorities do the other day? They said, right, 50 dinar notes are out, or that was a couple of 3 or 4 months ago, and now it's been the 20 dinar notes and part of the 5 dinar notes. They say, oh, in the case of 50, the 50 dinars, no, there's fake forgeries around. It has nothing to do with that. It was to get the money back into the system or into the banks. But the problem is, that's fine, but you need to come up with fresh notes to replace them, and they haven't been. And so the problem's getting worse. Libya is a work in progress, political work in progress. How long will it take to fix it? How long is a piece of string? I don't know the answer to that. And anyone who gives you an answer to that is a liar, because we don't know. All we know is that Libyans want it fixed, but because of the nature of the way that there are these players in power in Libya who want to stay in power, and they will do everything to make sure they stay in power. And unfortunately, the international community, by its actions, and particularly UNSMIL, empower these people. They don't disempower them. And that's why Libya remains a problem. It's a great country if you get the chance to go there. It's a fabulous country. The people are wonderful. Anyway.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, also we could continue to listening to you for hours. And especially thank you very much for just describing us part of life. I mean, how it works or does not work. I mean, this is very valuable to understand what's going on. And I mean, the end was a little bit not surprising that we don't know how long it will take. What came to my mind when you talked about, you know, this attempt of the international community, this idea that elections are the medicine for everything. I mean, a dictatorship falls and just we create institutions, and or in the sometimes they are already there, they are empty, and we fill them by elections, and we give them a free market economy, and everybody is happy, and I mean, it never did work. I mean, but of course, in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, we still thought it would work, but we have to be honest. I mean, more than 30 years later, we are not much wiser. And what came in mind to me, I mean, there was one example after Arab Spring, where the, I mean, international community, in this case, the Gulf Cooperation Council, tried a different way, no? Yeah. They said it's exactly, I mean, we don't do it the way like Egypt and Tunisia and Libya and so on, and it went, it failed everywhere, lately also in Tunisia, but we let the population, we let the society discuss which kind of state they want, no? And then they agree, and then we make a constitution. But it also failed. I mean, let's be honest. So I mentioned the local elections, and I was trying to read some things about it. I mean, and they are praised in a way as because they are local. Exactly what you said, this lack of legitimacy is not there on a local level because the people from the place, be it tribal, be it town, be it ethnic group, are voted for, and so there is a legitimacy. But can it help, or is it, I mean, the sign that unity will never work?
I think unity will work. Libyans are very proud of being Libyan. They are very proud of being Libyan. They're not always, and this may sound trite, but they're not always proud about other Libyans being Libyan. Now, that is unfortunately true.
This is not a good news. Yeah.
For democracy to work, there has to be full respect for the others. They may have want a different person to be elected. And that doesn't come in Libya. Democracy means my guy gets elected or no one gets elected. It's not a pluralistic democracy. And that's a problem. But in local elections, local elections works because it's one community, and has sort of worked. But yes, there have been local elections, some local elections. They were cancelled in the east and the south because the authorities there didn't want the present municipal leaders to be replaced, and we've seen this happen. People play with the ballot boxes. In Tripoli, when the last time there was some, the last time before when there were some elections, armed men went into the ballot stations and just stuffed them with ballot papers or closed them or whatever. Local democracy is a very fragile plant in Libya. It's got more chance of success than national democracy, but it's still a very fragile plant, and it's subject to the whims of the people with the guns, and unfortunately that is the case. Democracy, there is another system in Libya, by the way, and that is, I mentioned Libya being a community of communities. And you know, the community, I said, might be a town like Zliten or Zintan or Ajdabia, or it might be a tribe like the Awagir or the Abeidat or whatever, which are in the east, or the Warfashana in the west, or others. Each of these communities has recognized leaders who get into that position of being a recognized leader because they have the support of their community. And the minute they start doing something their community does not like, they're out. So in a way, they represent the will of their community. And in that sense, there is a different sort of democracy at play here. If you can get the different communities together to say, this is the sort of Libya we want, and there is an overwhelming majority in saying we're going to have a structure like this or whatever it is, that will be accepted because it's the will of the communities. And going back to the time of the king understood that, and Gaddafi understood it too, that you need to take the communities with you. And you have to talk to the communities and talk to their leaders, should I say. You talk to the recognized leaders of whether it's a tribe or a town or whatever. And that way you can get things done. But the ballot box is not the way to do it. Not yet. Not yet. I think that's very important to say not yet. It will be at some point, I'm sure of that. But you need to go with the flow in Libya. And unfortunately, a lot of the international community think, we know better, this is the way it's done. Well, one size doesn't fit all.
But you are mentioning, I mean, the king, the monarchy, and later Gaddafi. I mean, who is now there who could moderate such a thing? I mean,
I think UNSMIL could do that, but they're not doing it because certainly there are people who don't want it. The Haftars and Dubaibas of this world don't really want that. People are very the present players want to stay. It's as simple as that. They want to stay, and they're not going to. They will do everything to stop progress. At the same time, they all say they want elections, we want this and that, but you know, say one thing, do another. And so the mess remains. I don't see it changing.
I followed this Rome meeting. I mean, I think it was in the beginning of September, no? The nephew of the present prime minister, I mean, the baby, exactly of Tripoli, Ibrahim, and the son of General Haftar, Saddam, met, and I was, I mean, laughing inside and saying, family everywhere, until I saw that let me think, what is he? The son, the father of the son-in-law, so what is it to Trump, of Trump's daughter Tiffany was hosting this meeting. I mean, this is really, I mean, we should then mention also that to be just with Libya. Yeah. But do you think there are, I mean, kind of ruling families developing? Or, I mean, we read much about the role Saddam Haftar is playing now, and
Saddam Haftar plays an important role. Libyan politics are about personalities. And you saw this back in when they were going to have the elections in end of 2021 to be presidential elections, which didn't happen because people who had a vested interest in them not happening stopped them. But Libya is about personalities. Haftar, Dubaiba, Aguila Saleh, who's the head of the Parliament, the House of Representatives, and various others. And when you take one character out of the picture changes, the dynamic changes. And that will certainly happen when Haftar dies or becomes incapacitated. And he's quite old as it is. And the situation changes. And we saw that in the elections, by the way, for the presidential elections. There were 81 candidates, which is rather a lot for an election. And they're all saying the same thing. They have the same policies. There's no difference on their policies as well. But there's vote for me and everything's going to be wonderful. It's all be fixed. Just vote for me. And the next one's saying exactly the same thing. And most Libyans don't believe them. And one of the problems is Libyans have become very suspicious of any political player. The minute someone puts his head above the parapet and says, I'm going to stand for president, he's finished. Everyone turns against him. In a way, Libyans are waiting for the knight on the white horse to come and save them. Someone to save them, but who is not any of the present political players. And unfortunately, there isn't someone on the scene or on the right or even far away to fulfill that wish. And so I fear for Libya. Did I say it? I think there are various potential scenarios coming. And I said one of them is keep things staying as they are, a military dictator, possibly a constitutional monarchy, a federalist state. But we're not getting there because there are enough people blocking things. A friend of mine said, who is himself highly involved in Libyan policy, said, if you want to sabotage something, employ a Libyan. And it's true, things there's a sabotage, political sabotage taking place. And the ability to say yes to something while working to stop it happening is remarkable. Anyway, sorry.
No, as I told you, it's so interesting. By the way, when you mentioned Iraq, I also was thinking about Iraq. I mean, in the years 2006 to 2009, we all thought Iraq would not survive as a country, no? So it's still there. I have already a question, and please.